أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية أمير المؤمنين والأئمة المعصومين عليهم السلام والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين حبيب إله العالمين بالقاسم مصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الحكيم وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. I begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no doubt that it's due to His kindness and generosity. He provides for us opportunities such as these where we gather together in remembrance of Him tabaraka wa ta'ala. Next we send our heartfelt condolences to our living Imam and to each and every one of you as we are gathered to commemorate the wafat of Sayyidah Fatima al-Masuma bint Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhim jami'an salamullahi alayhim jami'an inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I know the weather is rough out there today, so inshallah please drive home safely. And I hope people didn't come because there was a football game on. I hope they stayed home because of the weather, inshallah. We are gathered, as we said, to commemorate the wafat of Sayyidah Fatima al-Ma'suma, who was given the title of al-Ma'suma by her brother, our 8th Imam alayhi salam. And as we know from our history that she was the daughter of our 7th Imam alayhi salam, and obviously the sister of our 8th Imam. We can imagine the influence that these two great personalities had on her life. We know that any child who is surrounded by goodness will have a greater chance of being good. Likewise, if a child is surrounded by different types of vices, if the parents are not careful, it is more likely that that child will pick up those vices. So hence we can understand then that by being around these two great personalities, Imams, what type of influence they must have had on her life. And the history has reported that even as a child, her knowledge and her spiritual awareness was very high. There's a very beautiful story that once when she was around 6 years old, there were a group of Shias who had come to Medina, and after the ziyarat of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, they decided to come and visit Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam in Medina. And with them they had a few questions that they wanted answered. When they came to the house of the Imam, they found that the Imam was out of town. He was not in Medina, so they left several questions on a piece of paper for the Imam. And they said that if the Imam can answer these questions back, we would appreciate it. After a few days, they finished their ziyarat of Medina and they were returning back to their home city. And they thought that they would pass by to see if the Imam was back. So when they came back to the Imam's house, the paper was returned back to them answered. All of their questions were answered, but the Imam was still not back in town. So they left with those questions answered. On their way out of Medina, they met Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, and when they informed him that this is what had happened, he looked at that series of questions and realized that it was Sayyidah Fatima al-Masuma who had answered each and every question. And the way she had answered those questions, he was so pleased with it that he said 3 times, Fidaha Abuha, Fidaha Abuha, Fidaha Abuha. He says, may her father be sacrificed for her, may her father be sacrificed for her, may her father be sacrificed for her. This is a very beautiful line. When you look in the books of hadith, it is the exact same phrase that was said by Rasulullah to Sayyidah Fatima alayha afdalu salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. So this demonstrates that she was a gifted lady, and at this time she was a 6-year-old child, yet she had that knowledge, very much similar to how Zainab alayhi salam had that type of knowledge being in that holy household. And I think you find a lot of parallels between the relationship of Sayyidah Fatima and Imam al-Rida and Zainab alayhi salam and her brothers, whether it is Hassanain or Abu al-Fadl or any of the other brothers. And this status and this gift that she had been given, it is apparent, especially in the words of our Aimma. For example, in the ziyarat that is recited for her, our 8th Imam, Imam al-Rida alayhi salam says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alayki ya Fatima bint Musa ibn Ja'far wa hujjatihi wa aminihi. He said, salutations to you, O Fatima, daughter of Musa bin Ja'far, the proof, the hujjah, and the trusted one. This is a great honor that is paid by an imam to this great personality. And therefore, it is no surprise that the knowledge that she had and the karamats that she had, that today we find that the center of Islamic knowledge, the center of Islamic studies is at her footsteps in Qum. This is an honor given to her by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and no doubt Najaf will pick up again, but the establishment that has taken place in the holy city of Qum is through the barakah of this great personality. And today we know that in Qum, the institution of this house of studies has grown to such an extent that you have about 200 educational and research centers in Qum, which 40,000 students from 80 different countries are studying our religion. This is larger than most universities, you can say, pursuing Islamic knowledge. And this is, again, I believe, a gift Allah has given her, because it is all happening under her shadow and under her footsteps. Based on that, today I want to discuss, based on the fact that knowledge is part and parcel of her legacy, I want to discuss some conditions of studying, that if one were to live by these conditions or meet these conditions, they would find that their studying would benefit them greatly. Now, I'm not just talking about Islamic knowledge. This is not just about going to the houses and studying. This is any type of knowledge, and nor is it restricted to a certain age, right? So many of us in this room may be done with our formal education, but if we are true servants of God, we are constantly striving to gain more knowledge. There should never be a time in our life where we can say, I'm satisfied. That type of regression or pausing in our progression is not part of Islamic ethics. So these are principles that have come from Islamic sources, obviously. One of the great books that is written is what is known as Munyat al-Murid. Munyat al-Murid is a book that's written by Shahid Thani, long time ago, but it is a book that describes the adab or the behavior or the manners that students of knowledge should have. And in fact, it's one of the key books that is given in houses when you first start, as you need to know what's required of the student before they pursue knowledge. So today I want to highlight some of these things, because as we know in Islam, knowledge is a great gift given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the Holy Quran says in the verse that we recited in Surah number 39, verse number 9, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ Say, are those who know equal to those who don't know? Yeah, clearly defining that those who have knowledge are not equal in any way to those who do not have knowledge. Knowledge, Allah describes in other verses, that characteristic which will give you darajat, which will give you rank. In fact, We find a hadith, for example, from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, where he says that based on your knowledge or based on your intellect will be your destination in heaven. The more you use your intellect, the more you use your knowledge, the more you work at refining it, it will give you that much honor in the hereafter. So these are great principles that we need to try and live by. And again, I know I'm speaking to a crowd who is past their formal education days, at least most of them here, but this should not stop us from pursuing knowledge. There's a very beautiful hadith about the greatness of knowledge from Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, where he says, "Kafa bil ilmi sharafan an yadda'iyahu man la yuhsinuhu." He says, knowledge is such a dignified thing that he who is not proficient at it claims that he is proficient at it. Yeah, people don't usually claim things. A person who's not a doctor will not claim to be a doctor, right? Unless they're insane. But person who does not have knowledge will always claim to be knowledgeable. Because it is an honor given to them to have knowledge and to claim to have knowledge. This is why you find people who sometimes overstep their own limits. It's important to know one's limits, but this is why we find people, because knowledge is something that should be, we all try and ascribe to, and this is very important for us to do that. So I want to discuss a few principles that again, if we adhere to, will really benefit us in the pursuit of knowledge, whichever way it is. The first is that knowledge should be done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only. It's simple, it's obvious, but it is something which is easily forgotten. Whatever knowledge we are trying to reach, whether it is again Islamic knowledge, whether it is medical, accounting, whatever your degree is or your proficiency is or your speciality is, it should be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you find that when one has that type of mindset, they will be very successful in whatever they do. And the reason people forget about that is because of different type of distractions. And this happens even in the houses, where people go, I'm sure, for the sake of God. Nobody goes into the houses for earning money. I can guarantee you that. Yeah. But along the lines, I think that people get distracted and their intentions change. So it's very important that we always do things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a very beautiful hadith from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, where he says, "Man talab al-ilm lillah lam yusib minhu baban illa izdada fi nafsihi dhullan wa fi nasi tawadu'an wa lillahi khawfan wa fi ad-dini ijtihadan." He said, he who seeks knowledge for Allah, no sooner does he learn even a chapter of that knowledge, does it increase in humility in him. Yeah? Now, he doesn't specify what type of knowledge this is, right? But if you are a scientist, if you are an accountant, and you are doing it for God, everything you learn will get you closer to God. Everything you learn will actually make you humble in yourself. It will instill humility in you, because it will make you realize as a person how much you don't know. Right? This is very beautiful about knowledge, and when you always do it for God, he says it will instill in him humility and humbleness in front of people, and it will increase his fear of Allah and his striving in religion. It will make him want to get closer to God. And then on the other hand, he says, and he who seeks knowledge for this world and for status amongst people and for a favored position with the ruler, no sooner does he learn even a chapter of that knowledge that it will increase arrogance in him. Yeah? And again, how true this is. When you meet people who believe they know something, it will make them very arrogant and haughty because they feel that they are knowledgeable. And again, this is a sign that they have not done it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for whoever is seeking knowledge, again, this is the primary first and most important step. The second condition or principle to gaining knowledge has to do with interest. you have to be interested in what you're studying. This is very important. No matter what field you are in, if you don't enjoy what you are doing, eventually that lack of enjoyment will catch up with you. Yeah? Especially if you have to do a 4-year degree, a 5-year degree, 6-year degree in something that you are not interested in, it will be very difficult for you to maintain throughout that time. This is something which is very, very important. And you'll notice this happening a lot of times in universities where students will begin in a certain path and then eventually they will change degrees, for example, drop out, for example. Again, this is because the truth is that a lack of interest will catch up with you. Even in the Hawza studies, you will find this happening, that people who go there for a year or two, eventually they don't have that himma, that ability or that drive to keep them going. And if you have interest in what you're doing, then no matter how difficult that journey is, you will be strong and be able to overcome that. And I think this is another reason why the Hawza structure has been so successful. Nobody, I think, really goes into the Hawza. We have few examples here and there, but by and large, I would say 90%, 95% of the people who go into Hawza are there because they are interested in going to the Hawza. Nobody would leave their comfortable lives and go and live, for example, in Iran or Iraq for 5, 10, 15 years if they don't have that interest. So interest in no matter what field you are studying is absolutely important to be successful in that journey. The third condition in obtaining knowledge has to do with patience. You have to be patient in your knowledge that you are seeking. There's a hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says, Man lam yasbir ala dhulli ta'allum sa'atan baqiya fi dhulli al-jahli abadan. He says, one who cannot endure the submissiveness or the patience entailed in learning for 1 hour will remain submissive in ignorance forever. Yeah? 1 hour of studying requires a lot of patience. No matter what field you are in, to go to class requires patience. To do homework requires patience. And the endurance that is required behind that is very important. Sometimes, in the journey of education, again, I can speak both from a secular education, as I've done my bachelor's degree and my master's degree from the Western University side, but I can also speak on the Hawza side as well, that there is no doubt that it is difficult to really concentrate and maintain in studies. It requires a lot of sacrifice. It requires sacrifice of friends. Sometimes it requires sacrifice of family. That if you're going abroad to study, you may not see your family for a very long time. It requires sacrifice of enjoying yourself, entertainment for a few years. We know that most of the enjoyment happens for people who are at college during a very key time. You have your friends going out and going to do different type of things. While if you are very serious in your education, you have to sometimes sacrifice on that fun. And no matter what you do, and I think another example would be sleep. You have to sacrifice a lot of sleep if you want to be patient. And you find that these are some of the characteristics of those people who have done really well for themselves in education. I'll give an example of one of our teachers who went to the Hawza when he was 13. And today, an amazing scholar, absolutely amazing scholar, finished about 18 years in Qum and then came back and was one of my teachers in Sham. But he would tell us stories that, when he went, obviously it was difficult for his mother to let a 13, 14-year-old child go to Qum. Those times were a little different back in the days. But he said they would write letters to him. And he said for a good 5 or 6 years, he would not read one letter. He would put them under his mattress because he knew that reading those letters would instill in him a feeling of going back home. Yeah, because he realized how much his mother missed him. And this is true for some of our marajah. One of the great marajahs in Iraq right now, one of the 4 marajahs in Iraq, also when you go to visit him, Ayatollah Bashir Najafi, he says the same thing, that when he was beginning his Hawza studies, any letter that would come from his family, he would never read it. It would be under his mattress for a good period of time, because he knew that that would um, entertain that thought within him of going back home, realizing how much his family missed him. So you find that our great scholars have done this, right? You find examples of scholars who used to take extreme measures just to stay awake for longer periods of time so that they can finish. These are some of the qualities of our great scholars, right? They sleep very little. They don't waste time on entertainment like we do, for example, TV and Facebook and these type of things. They have a purpose, and this is why they are so successful, because they're sacrificing everything else. And I think patience also is required, for example, in that sometimes when we see the end result, it makes us want to take a shortcut. What I mean by that is, for example, when we are studying and we see people who have already graduated and are earning money, we want to take shortcuts to get there quickly, right? The same thing applies in the Hawza studies. When you see people who are doing tabligh and you want to go do tabligh so bad that sometimes you are willing to skip over your studies to go do tabligh. Now this is in a positive sense. In the negative sense, you could see people who are earning money and you want to go do the same. But we have to be very patient in our education, no matter what it is, if we want to be successful. And this is why if you are very interested in knowledge, it won't matter to you where the classes are, what the classes are, what time the classes are. So for those of you who are really interested, Tuesday nights is not going to be a big deal for you to come to mosque. Yeah, this is a shameless plug on my end. Yeah, Tuesday night classes won't matter. If you're interested in studying, you will come and study. And this is why I have put it on Tuesday nights. I'm getting the people who are really interested in learning. I know it's difficult for others to come, but it is what it is. Yeah, that it'll require patience if you want to gain knowledge. So this is the third condition. The fourth condition is to find a suitable time to study. When you look even on secular sites, on secular information, there's no such thing as best time to study. Best time to study really depends on your personal mindset and your personal approach. Some tell us that that it is a better time, you can't say best time, but first thing in the morning. Not right when you wake up, maybe about half an hour, an hour after you wake up, because your mind is very fresh at that time. And you'll find in the houses a lot of classes are very early in the morning, for example. But as far as the studying, obviously if you're working, you have no choice when to study. But if you have a choice, you have to look to see what type of person you are, whether you're a night person or you're a day person. And if you're a night person, for example, I think I am a night person. I do some of my best work at night. But you have to be very disciplined, right? Because at night there are more distractions, right? You come home from a day's work, there's the TV, there's the internet, there's a lot of things that you have to do or you can do. So if you're a night person, then you have to be very dedicated and have a cutoff time, for example, and say that after this time, I will not do anything else but this work, and you have to be motivated to do so. So you have to learn to maximize your time as well and control it. So this is the fourth step, is that you as an individual need to find the right time to study. The fifth is that you need to study in a comfortable environment without distractions. It seems very simple, but it is very important that you need to be in an environment where you are not going to be distracted. Yeah? Whatever that distraction is, whether it is the TV, whether it is anything like that, you need to go. For example, when we were in Sham, one of the best places for us to study would be at the haram of Sayyidah Zainab alayha afdalu salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. But naturally, we couldn't go peak time. That would be very distracting. Yeah, people would bump into you. There'll be no place to sit. So you would find a very quiet time between salahs, between Dhuhr Salah and Maghrib Salah, for example, in the afternoon, when it'll be just quiet. There'll be about 10 people inside the haram, and you can sit there and do it. But you have to really find times which are going to be comfortable, and again, without distractions. And it's very important when you even look at secular studies, or if you look at surveys which are conducted, they will say things like lighting is very important. Temperature of the room is very important. Scent is very important. And what's very interesting is that these things are exactly in line with spirituality, right? If you want to really ascend spiritually, lighting is very important. We can't take these things for granted. Temperature is very important. You're not going to be able to recite beautiful du'as and long salat if it's very hot in that room. Yeah. Likewise, if the lighting is off in that room, or for example, it smells bad in that room. Yeah, whatever it is, distractions like these affect our spirituality, and of course, it will affect our learning as well. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. I remember we took a spirituality class, and our teacher, who had studied for a very long time, would say that it's very important that maybe about 20-30 minutes a day you take time to yourself. And I think I've said this before, it's very difficult to do here in the West. But you take 30 minutes to yourself, you go into a private room, turn off the lights, put on some candles, and sit there and meditate and ponder over certain things, and then you can gradually increase that time. Like what Brother Kumail was saying about sharpening the mind, these type of things really have a big impact on our spirituality, and likewise, like I'm saying, it has a big impact on our learning and our education. The sixth step is a healthy diet, which keeps the mind sharp. You're not going to be able to study if you have a big plate of biryani right before, yeah? Or if your wife is making a big plate of biryani and your mind is on that biryani, it'll be very difficult for you to study. But if you've fed your mind well, yeah? If you've fed your stomach well, you'll be able to do much more in your capacity, in your learning. Obviously, an empty stomach is not good. A completely full stomach is not good. You have to find a balance. And it's very important that you're able to find that balance. I remember in the Hausa studies as well, the morning time, because after breakfast, nobody has such a big breakfast it makes you want to go to sleep, but sometimes we're opposite in that, right? So like our lunch might be big or our dinner might be big. The most difficult time would be right after lunch, yeah, to go back into that classroom, because now you're tired, you're sleepy, the food is weighing down on you. So maybe to learn to eat correctly. So for example, these are some foods which are recommended to keep your brain sharp. So for example, dairy products, protein-rich foods, grains, vegetables, fresh fruits, and dried fruits such as walnut, almonds, and hazelnuts are all recommended components of a nutritious diet which can help keep your brain sharp as well. The seventh principle in studying is physical and spiritual cleanliness. These are things which seem very simple, yeah, but you're surprised how big of an impact it has. You have to be clean physically. It makes a difference, right? If you smell, you're not going to be able to concentrate fully. Same way, if the things around you smell, you're not going to be able to concentrate fully. If you're sweaty from playing a sport and then you go and study right away, it will not have that same effect. So physical cleanliness and of course spiritual cleanliness as well, to remain in the state of tahara, wudu at all times. When you look at the hadith on wudu, it has many benefits. The top one being it will please God, yeah, to be in a state of wudu at all times. It was very interesting when you look at wudu. When we look at it simply from a spiritual point of view, but the physical act of wudu and the physical cleanliness has a great effect on our health, right? At the minimum, 3 times a day we are washing our hands. We know how important it is to wash our hands, especially with the germs that are flying around today. We need to be constantly in the habit of washing our hands, and wudu instills that. Though we may not ponder over it, but we are washing our hands, we are washing our faces. And gargling, you know, it's not the wajib component of wudu, though it's a mustahab component to gargle your mouth. I just read online that there was a Japanese study that was done which broke people up into 3 groups, and it was a study on the effects of gargling, just rinsing your mouth out. And they gave one group of people, they were told to gargle their mouth 3 times a day with warm water. Not salt or anything, just open the tap with warm water and gargle. A second group was told to gargle their mouth 3 times a day with mouthwash, and the third group without gargling their mouth. I think it was 6 months or 60 days later, in the flu season, those 2 groups which were gargling their mouth had the percentage is given, it skips my mind, but they were not affected by influenza as much as those people who were not gargling their mouth. And interestingly, those who are gargling their mouth with just plain water were 39% less affected by influenza than those who are doing it with mouthwash. Just plain water. Yeah, and subhanallah, God has told us this 1400 years ago, gargle your mouth at the minimum 3 times a day. And this study did focus just on 3 times a day of gargling. So you can imagine, we know that salt water gargling helps with our throat and clearing our throat. But try this next time. I've actually tried it the last couple of weeks with this cold fever. Whenever I feel a sore throat coming on, I just gargle my mouth a few times a day. And subhanAllah, it really helps. Yeah? And it's not the water, it's God who's doing it, but we are using this wasila. But again, this blows my mind that, sometimes the religious components that we have, we don't realize the actual benefits of them physically. God doesn't just do things arbitrarily, right? So when we realize the physical benefits, it really helps us. So this is, again, the 7th condition. And the 8th condition, which we will end with here, is seeking the help of God in constant remembrance and dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to be successful in any line of education, you have to pray to God for success. And this is why even the most knowledgeable creation of God, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, ma salli ala. It says in Surah Al-Taha, Rabbi zidni ilman. Yeah, oh God, increase for me in my knowledge. And though he was the most knowledgeable person we know, yet he would beg God to increase his knowledge. And there's a very important dua. This was a dua that is found in Munyat al-Murid, and we had it all across our hawza written so that every class we would recite this dua. The dua is, I'll read it, it says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, Allahumma akhrijni min zulumatil wahm, wa akrimni bi nuril fahm, Allahumma aftah alayna abwaba rahmatik, wanshur alayna khaza'ina ulumik, bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. O Allah, remove me from darkness, and ennoble me with the light of knowledge. O my Lord, open for us your doors of mercy, and provide us with the treasure of your knowledge by your mercy, or kindest of the kind. It's a very beautiful dua. Inshallah, maybe I'll send it to the Jamaat. They can put it up on the website so I don't get 20, 30 emails asking me for this dua. But it is a very important dua, and that is something that really helped us in our studies. Again, these principles are not just for somebody who's going to the hawza or who's going to study. I think it applies for all of you and me as well. That if we stick to these principles or try to do them, very important. Like for example, in Munyat al-Murid and these type of books, it says that if you just beg God but you don't take any of these other conditions, it's not going to benefit you any. You have to show God you're serious. So showing God you're serious requires interest, requires patience, requires steadfastness, and then God will take you the rest of the way. So I want to list these 8 again, because I know you guys are excellent memorizers, mashallah. The first is that you do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second is that you must be interested in what you are studying. The third is that you have to have patience. And steadfastness. The fourth is you need to find a suitable time for you to study. The fifth is that you need to study in a comfortable place without distractions. The sixth is you need to maintain a healthy diet while studying or all around. The seventh is physical and spiritual cleanliness. And the eighth is seeking help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and constant dhikr of God. Again, if we do these things, inshallah, in whatever line of education or studying we want to go, we will find the benefit of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In remembering Sayyidah Fatima, under whose shadow again the greatest institution, or one of the greatest institutions of knowledge, is taking place today. It is reported that in the year 200 after Hijrah, her brother Imam al-Rida alayhi afdalu salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, was forced to migrate to Marv, or eventually Khurasan or Iran today. It was very difficult for Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam to be away from her brother. When you look at the history, it said that the first 6 or 7 years was spent under the guidance of Imam al-Kadhim, and then the next 20 years was spent under the guidance of Imam Rida. So she looked at him, and he was about 25 years older than her. So she looked at him like a father figure. So that separation was very difficult. And in the year 201 after Hijrah, it is said that she, and alongside with her brothers, decided to leave Medina and as well go to be with Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. On the journey towards Marv and Khurasan, it is said that they were attacked by Abbasid soldiers. And in that attack by the Abbasid soldiers, many of her brothers lost their lives with this battle. And again, we see a great parallel between Zainab alayhi salam and Sayyidah Fatima. And it is on this journey that many historians say that she was poisoned, and because of the poison, her health changed drastically, and she could not reach all the way to Tahra, to Mashhad or Khurasan or Marv, where the Imam alayhi salam was, and she was rather directed towards Qum. And in Qum she spent the final days of her lives. History reports that at the janazah, at the body of Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, Imam al-Rida and Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam were present. This is a great honor that was paid to this lady. The two Imams were there and respecting and paying respect to this great personality. Naturally, when we can understand the grief that they must be feeling when they were there over that body of Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. And likewise, then our heart goes to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, who returned back from Sham towards Karbala, and the grief that they must have felt standing over the graves of all of the family and companions. When we talk about the Arba'een, I know we just finished the Masaib of Arba'een. However, it is said that when the family alayhimus salam was returning back to Karbala, at that time Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari was already present at the grave of Imam al-Hussein. When his companion Atiyah saw the flags from a distant, Jabir said to Atiyah, Ya Atiyah, go and make sure that this is not the army of Ibn Ziyad that is coming back to Karbala. When Atiyah went towards and saw who these black flags were, he returned back to Jabir, slapping his face, and he said, Jabir, stand, for the son of Aba Abdullah alayhi salam has come to pay respects to his father. It is said Jabir looked at Imam Sajjad and said, سيدي عظم الله لك العجر بأبيك الحسين. فقال الإمام عليه السلام يا جابر ها هنا قتل أبو عبد الله، ها هنا ذبحت أطفال أبي، يا جابر ها هنا والله قتلت رجالنا وسبيت نساؤنا. He says, oh Jabir, it is here where my father was killed. Oh Jabir, it is at this place where my brothers were killed. Oh Jabir, it is at this station that the women were taken as prisoners. Then Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam said to Jabir, I ask you to leave this place now, as the women of the Ahlul Bayt want to come and cry over their family members. It is said one by one the ladies approached the graves of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Zainab alayhi salam approached the grave of Imam al-Hussein and began to scream, Wa akha, وحبيب رسول الله وابن مكة ومنى وابن فاطمة الزهراء وابن علي المرتضى ثم all the ladies began to cry upon hearing the chants of Zainab. And then history reports that one by one the ladies came and began to eulogize their family members. Zainab came and remembered the tragedy of Aba Abdullah. Layla came and remembered the tragedy of Ali al-Akbar. The mother of Qasim, Farwa, came and remembered the tragedy of Qasim. One by one the ladies eulogized. We can only imagine the eulogy of Rubab at the tragedy of her 6-month-old child Ali al-Asghar. When they all wept, Zainab looked at Sajjad and said, "Oh my son, now take us to the grave of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas." And the ladies went and began to weep at the grave of Abu al-Fadl. They must have remembered how Abu al-Fadl was the one who protected them, how Abu al-Fadl loved Sakina, Ruqayya so much. But today Ruqayya is no longer with them. فَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the return of our Imam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive the sins of our parents and our loved ones. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those going through difficulty that He end their difficulty. For those who have asked us to remember them in our prayers, Ya Allah, please accept their hajat. And for the zawar who are still on their way back, Ya Allah, please bring them home safely. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka antas samiul alim. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة تسبقها بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.